Hi, I'm Kirk House, and I'm going to give you guys a quick demo of some of the hardware or software I've been building in an attempt to solve the problem that so far has never been solved really for sim racing, and that's seat of the pants feel. There have been some sim rigs built, motion rigs I guess, where you've probably seen people on YouTube or maybe in real life getting sort of jostled around as they're driving. And what I've heard about those solutions to the problem is they're sort of they're high latency, meaning you're seeing things happen before you really feel them, because you're dealing with big motors, you're dealing with pneumatics, you're dealing with potentially moving around a 200-pound person in a chair, so it's not as sort of instantaneous as you'd find in real life. And so what I'm building here with some kit from TI, it's basically a USB powered motor controller. These are sort of new motors that are very low latency, very high accuracy. And so this technology has kind of come along to the point where I think we can actually gain some insight into what the car is doing beyond just using our eyes and maybe our ears. And I have a sense that that could contribute a lot. Maybe to lower lap times, we'll see. I'm going to do a bunch of laps eventually down the line and test and see, and send out some of these prototypes to some people to get their feedback as well. But anyway, that's the long and short of it. Is I want to solve the issue of seat of the pants. Analogy I like is Braille. If you're blind, you're not reading a book in the traditional sense. You use Braille, you feel the sort of bumps. And this is kind of the same idea, where we're never going to have full, motion simulators where you're feeling G-forces. But I think we can convey that information in a very low latency way, not through actually feeling the forces, but through other forces. And these little motors, I'm hoping, will solve that issue. I'm going to do a few laps here and demo the software. I'll try to make it short here. Basically, here's the software. This is pulling data directly out of iRacing. So you've got, pitch rate, roll rate, yaw rate. You also got longitudinal acceleration, lateral, vertical, and I guess that's lateral. So what I'm going to do is take this data and push it out to the motor controllers, which are going to essentially vibrate little motors that will tell you how hard you're braking. If your tail's stepping out, you should be able to feel that, etc. So my sort of test bed for this is the road course at Daytona, and the car is the RUF or RUF Porsche rear wheel drive. This is something like 700 horsepower. It's a monster, and that's not an accident. What I'm looking for is something that'll have the back end stepping out pretty consistently. And so far I've had a lot of luck with that in this Porsche. One of the sort of the big missing pieces I've found is not so much in the acceleration, which you can judge by yaw. You essentially want to be as hard on the gas as you can. But the braking, you really can't feel how hard you're braking. They do some things with ABS kicking and you feel the wheel vibrating, but really braking is, in my mind, one of the big issues, and I clearly cannot talk and drive. But another point, I think something that'll be new that people will enjoy. I did a track day at an oval course a few months back, and the first thing that really gets you is when you're in a bank turn like this doing a, I don't know, probably 100, between 100 and 120 miles an hour, you just slammed into the seat. And it's kind of jarring at first if you're not used to it. That's something I really want people to sort of know. If you're driving different cars, they should feel different. You shouldn't, you know, drive a Miata and then drive a 700 horsepower Porsche and not, you know that they're different other than what you see. Again, I think braking is the big missing piece. Yaw is a big missing piece. You can see up here, the data is all coming across. And I'm really bad at talking and driving. Other thing I want to talk about is the DK2, the Oculus Rift. I pre-ordered that, so as soon as that shows up, I think in July, they're saying it's going to ship, but we'll see if I get it sooner. I'm going to run through a bunch of the simulator titles, and it's got a built-in latency tester. So I know Neil's H, I'll leave it at H, did some testing with the Hammer and slow-mo camera and figured out a few things about some sims. I want to kind of have something like that where it's easy to quantify. A bit of a latency snob, so that's something I want to do. One thing as far as latency goes, you can tell if you've got an issue, is the wheel. If the wheel on the screen's lagging behind, and I can tell it's not very bad here, but it's definitely there. If you're using a TV or something like that and your wheel is way ahead of what you see on screen, then something to consider getting a better monitor or something like I'm talking about building. Speaking of building it, looking at potentially making a dozen, 2 dozen prototypes, shipping them out to some of the people in the community that, you know, can really hammer on these things and tell me if they're just a bad idea in general, or if there's something I can do to make them better. So that'll be interesting. And then if there's good feedback on these things, you know, I'll design a circuit board and ship that off and probably get 100 of them and go from there. But I'm really not that far off from having something functional, which is kind of surprising. So far a lot of things are kind of coming together to help me get this thing built just in my spare time. The DK2 Oculus Dev Kit 2. The first one was pretty awful, as some people have shown on YouTube, with the 720p screen. Latency was pretty bad. Essentially for sim racing, it's unusable. 1080p is what the DK2 will have built in, and that's going to be still probably too low. One thing to consider with VR headsets is the field of view. I mean, you're essentially taking a monitor and some lenses and getting in there like this, so it looks fine from a distance may not suffice. So the first consumer version of the Oculus Rift, they're talking 1440p, which will get us closer. I think eventually everybody's kind of admitted that for VR, 4K is going to be really when it starts getting interesting. They're also saying GTX 770 is probably the minimum you want to go with as far as the video card. So obviously high cost of entry, you're looking at $350 just for the video card to use the Oculus effectively. It's going to be probably around 90 hertz screen, so you got to maintain 90 frames per second, which is what I'm doing. I'm pegged at 100 here. This monitor can do more, but I am sticking to 100 because that's probably what the Oculus is going to do. And that's also why I'm not going 3 monitor. I've got a little limitation on the man cave. I'm just going to put the money I was going to put into a triple monitor setup and dump that into the Oculus Rift, and hopefully I don't get motion sick. Big problem with the Rift is latency, which causes sort of like the opposite of seasickness. So I don't know if I'm thinking this device I'm building, I haven't quite named it yet. Thinking for some other virtual reality purposes, you might find use where people are getting motion sickness if they can feel G-forces, even if they're not through their, you know, vestibular system. It may be sort of like a mechanical Dramamine. That's just my hypothesis, but all this will sort of firm up in the next couple of months as I get all the kinks worked out of the hardware. Okay, overcooked that. Again, this is a test track I'm using because you're just all over the place with yaw. Anyway, that's the latest. Thanks for listening. That was a bit of a rambling session there. I'm going to ground myself and show you guys. This is the TI Haptics evaluation module. You've got an, I don't know if you can see it here, a couple motors. Here's the old school kind of motor that you have in your phone. It's an ERM, I believe, motor. Just a rotating mass. That's where you feel the vibration. This is the LRA motor. These are new. You can't drive these without a chip that's specifically built to drive this kind of motor, and that's what I'm going to be using in this thing. Pretty interesting stuff. I won't bore you guys with the details of how I'm doing it, maybe until the next video. Anyway, let me know any questions.